Today on Capitol Hill, the Senate Armed Services Committee held a hearing on possible Russian hacking during the presidential campaign. Now, you may recall the House Intelligence Committee asked the Intel people for a briefing on that issue last month, but that invitation, curiously enough, was refused. As it turns out, our Intel folks did brief President Obama this morning and will brief President-elect Trump tomorrow. At first glance, there are good reasons for Mr. Trump and really the rest of us to question the various reports and seek the facts. But Ed Berliner cautions making comparisons between a now infamous Intel failure and the current investigation may impede a determination of the truth.
One of the most worrisome things that emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents.
I regret it now because the information was wrong. Of course I do. But I will always be seen as the one who made the case before the international community. But there wasn't a word in that speech, in that presentation, that was not vetted and approved by the intelligence community.
As the discourse grows louder and more muddled over President-elect Donald Trump and his public comments about the American intelligence community, there are plenty of co-critics who harken back to Colin Powell's speech before the United Nations, and what we now know was a massive failure to get it right. But seeking to connect what happened in the rush to war after the cowardly attack on America in September 2001, the current intel on alleged Russian cyber intrusions, seeking to sway the narrative in a presidential election, and trusting the word of a man currently on the run from Swedish officials over allegations of sexual assault and rape, is to many a sideshow to the real issues at hand.
We have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
Well, he's not exactly a bastion of truth and integrity. And so therefore I wouldn't ascribe to any of these individuals who are making comments that it is providing the whole unvarnished truth. Again, this report is going to include what it is that we know about what happened, what was collected, what was disclosed, and what the purpose and intent of that effort was.
What many are conveniently avoiding in discussion is that in the more than a decade since the revenge-minded mistakes of post-9/11 and today, is the internal overhaul within the CIA and the intel communities to stop guessing, question everything and everyone multiple times to avoid believing in fabricated tales. There is nothing wrong with President-elect Trump demanding the intel communities get it right, but is doing it so publicly the best thing for the country and his relationship with those who are sworn to protect America? J.D., it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Ed, and you have prompted a whole lot of questions that we will discuss right now. I'm very pleased to be joined by our panel, and right here with me on the anchor desk, we're so pleased to welcome in former Florida State Senator and former Yahoo executive Jeremy Ring, and joining us via Skype from Washington, it's our good friend, international reporter Margaret Howell. Now, let's go to the news of the day, folks. During that hearing on Capitol Hill, our DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, and the other officials testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee with John McCain in the chair, and Director Clapper insists Russia is becoming a major threat to cybersecurity in this country. Let's listen to the DNI.
Russia has clearly assumed an even more aggressive cyber posture by increasing cyber espionage operations, leaking data stolen from these operations, and targeting critical infrastructure systems.
All right, that's well and good. And let me turn to you, Jeremy. Your background with what became a huge business in terms of the Internet. Look, even during my days in Congress 10 years ago, on a daily basis, the Chinese were trying to hack into everything at the Pentagon. We knew the Russians. We know that other governments are doing this. I guess the headline today between the lines is that Clapper, in his words, telling McCain and the Armed Service Committee he had no doubt that Russia was involved in some sort of hacking during the election campaign. Do you agree with him? And do you see why there are many of us who might be skeptical of that claim?
Well, here's what I agree. I agree that Russia is probably very powerful and strong in cyber espionage. as the United States, and probably as is China. The director also said that next week he would be issuing a more detailed report on this. I'd like to see that. Today was obviously very high level. He made some comments as you just read. But I think the investigation is proper. But now let's see the information that comes back. So I think we need to see where it is before we actually make that final determination.
And it would be well and good, Margaret, if we were dealing with the diagnostics of intelligence gathering. But all this happens against the backdrop of a hotly contested presidential campaign. And indeed, when you think about my old colleague Devin Nunes, now running the House Intelligence Committee, asking Clapper and the intelligence briefing folks for a briefing last month and then being told, no, we can't do it, waiting till this month, going in front of Mr. McCain, who has his own curious motivations for holding that right now, and then what we see with Clapper saying, yep, the Russians are involved here, forgive me, I'm getting this whole kind of political vibe off what should be a legitimate inquiry into problems with cyber intelligence and cyber surveillance.
I couldn't agree with you more, J.D. Look, Clapper was wrong when he was the national geointelligence spatial leader, saying that the soil samples in Iraq, that they were manufacturing weapons of mass destruction. He was wrong in 2013 when he said the national intelligence community was not doing dragnet surveillance or collecting information mass on American citizens, and he is wrong now. Why we keep listening to this man because of a title is really beyond me, and in my opinion, he committed perjury in 2013 before the Congress when he blatantly said that we were not collecting information that we were in fact collecting. I do not think he's qualified to hold this position, but more importantly, the partisan aspect of why he's saying what he is. Look, there's no doubt about it. I lived and worked in Russia myself. The Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, everybody tries to hack everybody all the time. There's no question about it. And I am of the belief that we are hackers ourselves. What I do not believe, and what most Americans don't believe, is that the Russians had an influence in the outcome of our election, or that they had that they had any impact whatsoever on Hillary Clinton losing the election, more importantly.
Well, to that point, Jeremy, it does appear the narrative is trying to lead to the perception that even though there's a disclaimer, oh, no, we really don't believe that, but we've been in politics, albeit on different sides of the aisle. You could agree with the notion they're trying to plant a doubt as to Mr. Trump's legitimacy?
Well, I think a couple things. Number one, everything, unfortunately, and I say this with great disdain of where Congress is today, is political. And you can't get away from that. This happens to be more of seemingly bipartisan. That being said, though, as a Democrat, on the one hand, do I think Russia hacked? I absolutely do. Do I think they tried to hack our election? I do. Do I think ultimately that was the outcome? I'm still questioning that. I mean, Democrats have to stop, I guess I'll put it, blaming the winner, and I say that as a proud Democrat who wants to go back and win. And I think excuses, we need to kind of step back and say, how are we going to win now?
Well, we have this in the context of an intelligence, a cyber hacking situation, cyber espionage. Maggie, I don't want to belabor the point about the politics of this, but for those who tell us, no, the intelligence community is made up of dedicated professionals, I still can't square this with refusing to brief, to carry out their constitutional charge to brief the House Intelligence Committee last month, or going back to 2012 where there was a different electoral outcome, where you had Benghazi and you had the intelligence guys basically giving free hand to Susan Rice and others to say, oh, it's an obscure YouTube video that inflamed the Arab street that led to the killing of 4 Americans in Benghazi. So you have one situation where intelligence arguably is manipulated to win, and another situation where some of us look and go, it's being manipulated now to prompt a question. Your take?
That's excellent analysis, and I agree with you. Look, the same intel community that told us that a YouTube video had sparked bingo, the same intel community is telling us that Russia hacked our election, hacked the DNC, and possibly influenced the outcome of our election. What I see this as, and we see, we don't really have true journalism anymore. We have talking heads in media that are very narrative-oriented. They're trying to now mar the post-election process and a Trump presidency. And they're doing that by attacking the legitimacy of his victory. And unfortunately, we have a few, in my opinion, a few members of the intel community that have a similar agenda.
Fair enough. Let me let Jeremy get the last word in on this. Brother, 20 seconds. Sum it all up from your perspective.
Sum it all up is that we have to see what happens next week when the rest of the evidence comes out. There's reason to be skeptical because of history, but there's also reason to believe that something concrete happened here. Let's give it a week.
We shall, with the admonishment that CIA analysts tell us sometimes the findings are very nuanced. We'll see what happens there. Folks, we appreciate it. Jeremy and also our dear friend in Washington, thank you so much, Margaret.